Speaker.
I call Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't take too long on the debate on this bill. It's great that the parties support it, and we certainly do. The inquiry was, as always, a good one and raised a number of issues that haven't been addressed in this legislation. It would be good to work with the Minister on more legislation early next year, to see if we can resolve some of these issues that haven't been able to be resolved in this bill. Just a few things to note from the inquiry, I think, sir. The kids voting program that was rolled out, 78,000 children had access to an experience of being able to vote and learn how to vote in year 9 and 10. And I think that's a really good start, and we need to keep rolling out that program. I recently gave a talk at Logan Park High School, and while there's senior students there, and while about 2/3 of the students there were learning about the New Zealand electoral system, about 1/3 had not. And so this, there is still a serious gap when young people don't understand how our electoral system works, and we can do a great deal more to improve that. The advanced voting is increasing, as it's been discussed. And there was a lot of conversation in the committee about there being more places for advanced voting in places where people are, where they go, as opposed to expecting them to go to the local school hall, and increase opening hours. And if we were able to do that, we could potentially shorten the period of advanced voting, as long as there was greater access during that period of advanced voting. And greater access by having polling booths in the places where people go during the day and in the weekends is incredibly important if we want to maximise people's access to their democratic right to vote. The voters in prisons issue, which was raised briefly by my colleague, was also talked about to some degree, and continues to be a stain on New Zealand's democracy. That man's bill was allowed to pass with the support of the National Party to disenfranchise thousands of New Zealanders, many of whom, a predominant number of whom, are reportedly Māori. Disenfranchise those voters and prevent them from voting was a disgraceful act at the time, and continues to be a disgrace. Now, when people are convicted of a crime and they are sentenced to a custodial sentence of 3 years or more, you may be able to argue that they shouldn't vote. I wouldn't argue that, but you may be able to justify that. Someone might. But at the moment, it's for a person. The change that was made means that most prisoners now, including those who have sentences of less than 3 years, are not able to vote. Those people are entitled to have a say, all prisoners in my view, are entitled to have a say in the democratic processes of their country. They are in fact one of the most excluded groups of people from the democratic process when they are in prison. The whole point of the prison process and incarceration is to punish them by relieving them of their freedom of movement, does not relieve them of their rights as citizens. We do not strip citizenship rights from people who are convicted of crimes and are imprisoned. We simply remove them from society and remove their right to free movement. So these people all have rights as citizens, and one of those core fundamental rights in democracy is that they should be able to vote. Given particularly that the laws that are created, the most powerful laws, if you like, that are created in this place are the laws that enable a person to be incarcerated, the punishment laws through the criminal system. They have a right to have a say as to who represents them in this place. So they have some kind of voice. And the fact that we continue to disenfranchise thousands of New Zealanders, many thousands of Māori in particular, is an ongoing disgrace and needs to be changed. So there was some talk about voters with disabilities, and there was a higher level of satisfaction, if you like, with the voting system in the last election for those people who had disabilities, but there is still more that can be done to improve access for those with disabilities. And when I say improve access, I don't just mean making it possible for a person with a disability to vote. I mean making sure they have all of the privacy, the agency, and the access to voting without others being involved that we all enjoy as people who, in the main, are able-bodied. So it's not just about whether they can actually physically vote, it's the circumstances in which they're able to vote, that they don't need to use another person to interpret for them. They don't have to, that the rules do not impose unnecessary burden on them, like, for example, the rule that says that they have to verbally say that what their name is as part of the voting system, which for many people with a disability is not possible, and it is a silly rule that makes it very difficult for those people. It reduces their access. So we can certainly do much more to improve access to the voting system with people with disabilities. And so, just finally, the Māori electoral option was also discussed. There's a strong view that the Māori electoral option should be possible for people to change from the Māori to the general, from the general to the Māori and back again once every electoral period rather than once every 5 years, and to decouple, the report describes decoupling the Māori electoral option from the census, since the census is actually irrelevant to the rights of people to be able to vote and to the electoral cycle. So there was some very good discussion. Not all of it is represented in this legislation, but there's no doubt more time to make some changes. Finally, tomorrow is the 20th anniversary, as I understand it, of the very first MMP election. The very first MMP election was 12th of October 1996. And as what we have not done in the last 5 years is make the changes to MMP that were promised by National after the 2014 election. So we would remember that we had a referendum on whether or not to keep MMP or not, and there was a resounding call from New Zealanders to keep MMP, and a strong commitment from New Zealanders to support changes to the MMP system that would improve that system, to improve the democratic approach, to improve access, to improve the quality of representation in this House. None of those things have been done by National for all sorts of variety of excuses. And you go and talk to Judith Collins if you want to find out about those foolish excuses that she made at the time. So we've had lots of time now to consider what those options might be, to make those changes. We continue to have a government that, despite promises to change the system, to improve MMP after the referendum, National broke that promise, and we still do not have those changes set out in an electoral bill. This was also a missed opportunity to make those changes to improve our democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.